on AM 560, The Answer.
Now, from the Signature Bank Studios, this is Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft and Amy Jacobson on AM 560, The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan and Amy. Doge is not going to be enough, but we knew this. Wall Street Journal noting that the Congressional Budget Office reported yesterday federal spending rose 15% in the first 4 months of fiscal 2025. Outlays in the first 4 months rose $317 billion. By its own accounting, Doge has only saved a little bit more than 10% of the incremental increase. But they're only 3.5 weeks in, too. The usual spending suspects were to blame. Social Security is up 7%, Medicare up 5%, Medicaid up 9% because of rising cost per enrollee. That's what happens in things that are price controlled, Medicare and Medicaid. President Trump has taken these programs off the reform list, which the Journal opines is like saying you want to go on a diet except for the beer, chips, and ice cream sundaes. Fair enough. But there's something else that Doge is doing, and the contretemps over USAID is a good example. It is generating a lot of attention that's gathering a lot of interest from Americans and providing some details on just exactly what we're doing, much to the chagrin of many of those Americans paying attention. And that engagement is a good thing, too, because then you potentially sustain engagement when it comes to the big, more difficult things where the real policy action is, which is on GOP budget bills this year. So Doge is more than just the savings it's achieving on a real-time basis. It's also the engagement it's creating over the reckless fiscal policy that has persisted at the hands of both parties for so many generations. For more on this, well, you know what? One other thing I wanted to set up before we get to Andy McCarthy on the legal aspect of this. There was a good sort of wrap-up piece that our friend Ed Morrissey did over at hotair.com about, responding effectively to this constitutional crisis cri de coeur from the left over Doge's work. Doge was set up by the Democrats. What? Yeah. For example, as Attorney Tom Renz explained in a lengthy thread on X, Trump took an agency launched by Obama in 2014 called the U.S. Digital Service and renamed it U.S. Doge Service, made Musk a special advisor to it. Then Trump installed Musk's team as U.S. Doge service staff and retasked the agency to find and expose all government spending in the executive branch. Took something that existed and, within his authority as the executive, repurposed it. That's not unconstitutional. The Daily Wire's Luke Rosiak did a deep dive of his own and discovered that Trump has Joe Biden in part to thank as well. Trump largely ignored the previous iteration of the U.S. Digital Service, assuming its work revolved around its ostensible mission of improving executive branch IT. Instead, it became a beehive for left-wing activists, and Biden reversed Trump's action to protect it from political interference once in office. So Trump 1.0 to Biden. Doge took over the U.S. Digital Service, a 300-person tech office President Barack Obama set up inside the executive office of the president in 2014 to fix healthcare.gov, Obamacare. Remember how badly that rollout of that website was? So the USDS sought out Silicon Valley innovators and was authorized to circumvent federal hiring procedures to get them, hiring young people from tech world and putting them together to work for Obama, unmoored from the stuffy rules of a typical government building, led to an environment of overt left-wing advocacy. So Obama designed designed it this way, making the USDS administrator its top employee a political appointee. When Trump took over in 2017, he didn't attempt to turn the tables. Instead, he turned the other cheek. He reclassified the top job at the digital service, as a career position, not a political one. USDS staff abused that trust, as described. So Trump learned a few lessons the hard way from his first term. And as he goes on to write in his piece, Luke Rosiak over at Daily Wire, the irony is that Democrats build a ticking time bomb. He means that in terms of bureaucrats antagonizing Trump, but he also means almost literally in this case, Obama built the U.S. Digital Service for data system development, but allowed it so much autonomy that it attracted people who used its power for political activism. That actually accelerated during Trump's benign neglect of the digital service and exploded into full bloom under Biden, who made USDS, the digital service, explicitly political rather than technocratic. And so enter Trump to pick up where Biden left off with the same autonomy, but orienting it in a different direction. So Obama and Biden provided the foundation for the Trump administration to do what it's doing with Musk and the Doge boys. How about that? Constitutional crisis? Let's put that question to our friend Andy McCarthy. Andy McCarthy, of course, is former Chief Assistant U.S. Attorney, Southern District of Manhattan, and contributing editor at National Review, also the author of the bestseller, Ball of Collusion, The Plot to Rig an Election and Destroy a Presidency. Andy, thanks again for joining us. Appreciate it.
My pleasure.
How about that little hoisting by your own petard?
Well, I think it goes to what you were saying at the beginning about how what Musk is mainly doing is now shining a light on a lot of stuff that progressives and Democrats would like to see hidden, although you're right to say that there's been abuse by both sides when it comes to giving us this monstrosity of a government that we have. But the reason your first point, Stan, I think connect up well to your second point is that if you don't change this by legislation, what we're going to have is the infrastructure that gets laid by the executive branch in one administration is just going to be co-opted by the next administration and turned to its purposes. And you know, for now, progressives don't like this, right? But we won't like it either if the next administration is a Democratic one and like they find maybe the Soros son equivalent of Elon to start messing around through the federal bureaucracy and turning it in the other direction. So if you don't change this in the place where the administrative state has been built, which is by legislation, and I really think the more you look at this, a lot of this legislation is the roots of it is the post-Watergate era, when the executive branch was very weak, when the Democrats had overwhelming majorities in Congress, and these were guys who were basically reared on the lore of the New Deal, and they went wild. And Carter basically signed whatever they wanted, whatever they put in front of him, he signed it. So we're living in that world now. And if you don't if you don't elect people who are going to revisit that and turn it around, and the only way you can do that is by exposing these abuses of, the monstrousness of this government spending and what's being used for. And you have to tie that around the necks of the Democrats so that when people go to the polls, they elect different people. Because if you don't have the majorities in Congress that are necessary to undo this legislation, then we're just going to play, ping pong, depending on who's in the White House.
Right. No, I agree. I mean, with that said, I mean, use the power you have when you have it, legitimate power you have when you have it. Yep. But it's funny you say that, too, because, for so long, and maybe this needs some further discussion as well. For so long, we sort of operated under this idea. Arthur Schlesinger's book, The Imperial Presidency. Congress is continuing to weaken. It's abdicated its authority, and there are examples of that, of course. But the Imperial Presidency maybe isn't as imperial as we were led to believe.
No, there was nothing. It was actually, I had occasion a couple of years ago, I think it was now, because it was the 50th anniversary of Watergate. Maybe it was last year. But I did a long essay on the, sort of just revisiting Watergate and what was behind it. And Nixon was, in a lot of ways, I mean, I don't carry any brief for Nixon, who was, by the way, a very big government Republican, who began a lot of these agencies that are now the source of a number of our woes. But in terms of what he did as the chief executive, to say that he, did something so singular that like LBJ or JFK or these other guys didn't do the same kind of stuff is ridiculous. He was just the guy who was sitting in the chair when the music stopped. And they did run him out of town, which they had the ability to do. And as a result, because of the position they were in with the big majorities in Congress, they were able to get a lot of this progressive wish list done. But I just think that the contention that Nixon was unusually imperial as a president, when you look back at FDR and LBJ and some of these, it's just it's preposterous. It's just they had an opportunity to install their vision of progressive governance on the United States, and you could say that Nixon did a lot to grease the wheels for that because in his own way he was kind of a big government Republican.
Well, I mean, it's basically the axiom with the left is they're only concerned about the concentration of power in areas where they don't possess it. I mean, that's right. Basically it. So it goes back and forth. I wanted to turn.
Go ahead. I was surprised to see over the weekend. I was just going to agree with you. I was surprised to see over the weekend that they suddenly don't like unelected bureaucrats with unchecked power.
Yeah, right.
Who knew?
Right.
Who knew?
Yeah, quite an about face. So we had some other action we wanted to get your expert opinion on because I'm a little squeamish about it. Let's start with Eric Adams in New York City and this dismissal of the charges that's been ordered by the Attorney General without prejudice, so they can refile. And pending review after the New York City mayoral election in November of this year, because and without any comment on the case against Adams, because they believe that he was targeted for political reasons. What's your view on postponing any review of Eric Adams' possible criminal wrongdoing until after the election?
I think it's a disgrace. I don't think there's any reason to believe that case was politically motivated. It was started before the whole, Adams' claim that it's retribution because he spoke out on immigration. I mean, he's part of the immigration problem who's like posing as the solution now.
Yes.
But when the investigation began, that wasn't a thing. That wasn't like there wasn't any Biden border crisis that Adams was fighting about, and the investigation touched not just Adams but the corruption throughout his administration. I've never thought much of the case, Dan, but the reason I haven't thought much of the case is because it's small time. Because Adams is small time. It's not that he's not corrupt. It's just he's kind of, small time. And the idea what I don't get from Trump is that throughout the prosecution of him, which was unabashedly political by Bragg, the Manhattan district attorney, what he touted throughout that was the independence of the Southern District prosecutors, the same ones doing the case against Adams, who looked at his case, that is Trump's case, and decided that there was no campaign finance case against him. And It wasn't like they were trying to give him a break. They actually did prosecute Cohen, but they looked at it hard and they decided that when you applied the campaign finance laws, you couldn't make a case against Trump. So Trump used the independence of that office and the credibility of its conclusions to his advantage, and now they're turning around in the absence of any evidence and claiming that the prosecution of Adams was political, which is just nuts to me.
Yeah, but is there evidence, though, that Adams took bribes and solicited illegal campaign contributions?
Yeah, it's a 57-page indictment that lays it out in rich detail.
Yeah. No, that's a good point, too, about Trump's use of the Southern District previously as sort of a rhetorical cudgel against Bragg. Yeah. Yeah, no.
All right. And then, Mr. McCarthy,
I'm on board.
Yeah, what do you think about pardoning for Rod Blagojevich? Unconditional pardon for him.
Yeah, did that just happen? I hadn't heard that.
Happened yesterday.
Yesterday.
Yeah, I guess it's not. Didn't he commute his sentence?
Yeah, 5 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
So I guess it's not. He's done that before, right? There's been at least one other instance, I think, where he commuted a sentence and then has turned around and pardoned. I'm sorry, I'm blanking on it because I didn't know about the Blagojevich thing. I guess I'm just not surprised. I think the next one will be Menendez.
Really? You think so?
Yeah, I mean, have you heard Menendez?
Oh, yeah, I heard him touting Trump and praising Trump and kissing, bootlicking him.
Well, it works. So I thought it was hilarious. He's on the steps of the courthouse saying, President Trump is right about this.
I know, I was shocked.
Where were you on the floor of the Senate in 2017 to the end of 2020 where Trump was the worst guy in the world? Like, President Trump has figured it out. Great.
Yeah.
Great.
So here's the larger question, because I'm picking up what you're laying down. It's how do you go after lawfare and not essentially, become what you're attempting to combat? He wants to use these as examples to send a message to DOJ and to FBI, up and down the ranks, not just at the secretary or leadership level, since they're going to be his people, that what was done to me and to others, many others, was wrong, and you better not do it again. And this is, I think, in part his way to do that. But of course, it's open to the criticism that you're lodging and I've lodged, that to provide special rights and privileges to people who are friendly or complimentary is the same sort of lawfare you're decrying. In a sense, there's different there's different systems of justice. But so how do you send that message unmistakably without falling into that trap?
Well, it's a hard problem, and I think you're right about that. But the way to stop lawfare is to stop lawfare, right? Which means no one's above the law, but we shouldn't be bringing cases unless they're what Bill Barr called meat and potatoes crimes. In other words, if you're dealing with people who are in public office or seeking public office, so that you have this situation of the law enforcement apparatus potentially interfering with electoral politics, you can't have a rule that says these guys are immune from prosecution just because they're in politics. But you have to make sure, if you're going to bring a case like this, that it's a very serious crime that's supported by very strong evidence, and the public, in looking at it, would say, anybody in America who did this sort of thing would get prosecuted for it. And if you can't meet that standard, you shouldn't bring the case. Now, I think with Adams in particular, no one was conceivably going to accuse the Trump administration of lawfare if they let the Southern District just go ahead and do what they were doing, which was have a trial of Adams in April, because then we would have been able to see, is there a case or there isn't a case? It looks to me from reading the indictment, it's not the case of the century, but it looks like there's crimes there, and he's presumed innocent, and he was going to have his day in court, and we would have seen. But no one was going to accuse the Trump. Look, there may be lawfare problems for them down the road, and obviously they're having to deal with the questions about the blanket pardons for the January 6 people, which, probably 1,000 of those are worthy pardons and several hundred, are very questionable. So it's not like they don't have their own bundle of things to worry about. But I don't think anybody was going to accuse them of lawfare over continuing the Adams prosecution, which began under the Biden, the Southern District under the Biden Justice Department. And when you look at the investigation, as the Southern District said in a letter that they wrote to the judge like a week or two ago, there's substantial evidence that the investigation was open and churning long before there was any debating between Adams and the Biden administration about immigration policy. So there just isn't any credible claim that the investigation was brought by the Southern District, which has a reputation for being pretty independent, as a result of, political pressure from the Biden White House. There's just no factual confirmation of that.
Andy McCarthy, former Chief Assistant U.S. Attorney, Southern District of Manhattan, that we're speaking of, and contributing editor at National Review, also the author of the bestseller Ball of Collusion, The Plot to Rig an Election and Destroy a Presidency. Andy, thank you as always.
Thanks, guys. Have a great day.
You too, and he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
Hear about the big stories of the day, then talk about them right here on Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560. The Answer.
You said bye-bye to big government. Now it's time to trim the fat from big wireless. Pure Talk gives you the exact same service. They use the same cell towers, the same 5G network. You get better customer service, and you pay half the price for the exact same thing. Get unlimited talk, text, 15 gigs of data with mobile hotspot for just $35